And I told.
Oh, the one about the.
I want you to like what you're doing.
You have bobcat in your backyard? Hey, you better watch out for our new friend.
He made it new. Yeah, he made it know he couldn't be here this week.
You're like, exactly. You're like me. I can't do that. I know it actually.
Hi, Mikhail. How are you? All right.
Like if you were seeing me at Target and I could probably, but that's me today.
Nobody wants to see.
Good evening, everyone. Calling the special meeting of Tuesday, December 4th, 2018 to order. Please stand for the pledge and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Good evening, everyone. This evening, Win TV is taping this meeting. It is streaming live now on Win TV's YouTube page at youtube.com/Windsor TV5. It is also broadcasting live on Win TV channel 95, and this program will be rebroadcast on channels 5, 95, 96, and will be available on demand on Win TV's YouTube page. Next on the agenda is audience to visitors. Anyone wishing to address the board may come forward, sign in on the sheet, and state your name and record for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. Just as a reminder that no remarks or comments can be made against employees of Windsor Public Schools or children outside of your own. When there are 30 seconds, Mrs. Khan will hold up a red card as an indication for you to start winding up your comments, and at 3 minutes, she will hold it up permanently. With that being said, does anyone wish to be recognized on the audience to visitors? Anyone wishing to be recognized? Seeing and hearing none, I will close audience to visitors. Next is budget assumptions fiscal year 20. I will recognize Dr. Cook.
Yes, thank you, President Lockhart. So Annually, at the start of the budget process, we present to the board budget assumptions, and so we have given the board budget assumptions for the 2019-2020 budget. These are used to guide our work through the process. It also gives the board an update in where we stand on several of the larger accounts, such as health insurance and grants and utilities, transportation, things like that. And so boards received several copies. I just want to make sure the copy I suggest you work from is the one provided to you this afternoon that is numbered 1 through 9. And here to answer any questions you have. Danielle is here as well as she's approaching the desk. Answer any questions you might have about the assumptions.
All right, and as we consider the assumptions, Mr. Fury's not here. He's out of town taking care of family business. Mr. Fury wanted to make sure that we reflect to the board that the budget assumptions that we had last year, he wanted to try to mirror them as much as possible, as well as be reflective of some of the concerns over the past year with those budget assumptions to make sure they were somehow documented. There was some private discussion back and forth about some concerns about some things. That's why we're down to the 9 items that you see on this sheet this evening. So if there's any points to process or what's going on, I can answer those directly. But I'll entertain any questions about any of these budget assumptions. Mr. Dobler?
Danielle, I just had one quick question, and it's in regards to the diesel fuel. When, I don't remember offhand, when do we lock in that rate? 'Cause I see that the projected for the next 2019-20 is $2.50 a gallon.
Right.
I mean, is there a special date, or it's just when you think that it's low enough, it's not going to go any lower?
So I am in constant communication with the town of Windsor, and they actually are the ones who set the rate, and then we follow. The gas locks in late December, and then diesel locks in usually March,
Okay.
hopefully early April.
So just basically during the budget process, it's not like it kicks in like
Right.
May or June.
Right.
After we're done, so
We
hopefully.
usually always have it by the time we go to the town.
Okay, so that's a projected rate, so that's floating, that may change, that will most likely change when it's locked in?
Yes.
Okay, that was all I had, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Mr. Elvo?
Thank you, President Lockhart. Dr. Cook or Ms. Batchelder, one of you will know the answer. I know we're in the process of doing a study relative to demographics. I know that in the budget assumptions we're using NASDAQ numbers. When would we potentially have those new demographic numbers?
They were waiting on a few pieces of information from different agencies outside of ours, and one piece from us. They gave us an update that they predict a 7 to 8% increase in enrollment by 2022. I don't have this other than the email from DRA, but they shared that with me up front to just let us know that, as I've shared before, our enrollment is different than the majority of Connecticut. That was their wording as well, is that our enrollment does look to continue to increase over the next few years. And I expect the final report within 2 weeks. And I really hope for it about this time next week. So the board should have it in their hands by the December 18th board meeting.
Thank you. The other question was the various grants we get. You're projecting them to remain level? Isn't it? Well, I know we have to play games here in respect to coming up with a number to work with, but the reality is we don't know what the new governor is going to do or not do. Have we?
Right, and we're acting on the best information we have from the state, being a alliance district considered still from the state. They have indicated that ECS would stay the same, and that as recently as last week, Dr. Oliver and myself met with the state, and they again indicated their indications are that it would be the same for our alliance grant as well. And in discussions with the town, they're looking at keeping grant funding most likely the same, in their grants as well. And so That would be my best guess too, following the political scene at the state and talking to legislators, is that, we would look at a flat ECS for next year.
And I too would hope that the price of diesel goes down, at least the barrel prices. Today we broke yet another low number, so.
Yeah, that is,
Let's just hope it continues
Right.
for another 2.5 months.
Yeah, as Danielle said, we find out late March, early April, typically just before the council, and it's for July to June, which makes it hard, if we're buying the barrels and storing them, it would be easier to predict. But the fact that we're predicting what diesel would cost July to June of 2020. So that's the difficulty there. But as you would want us to do, we put in kind of what we believe would be the high number of that range, and we hope to have good news for the board at some point.
All right, thank you.
Right. I think Patrice McCarthy is also going to be at our meeting in December as well, so we can prep her to see if she can give us any insight of what she's hearing in the halls with the new legislature coming in and with the new governor coming in. So any insight she can provide would probably be helpful to us. Mr. Bosch?
First, just as a general comment, I think the format and readability of this document is really strong. I think it's really well put together. I have a few questions. My first question is about a budget assumption that I think we should have on here that's not here, which is the impact of the 6 collective bargaining agreements we have on the budget. And that's one, whether we put it as a budget assumption or not, I know we talked about it very early on in the process. And that's probably the single item that has the most influence on the overall contract. So, I'd leave it to everyone else to decide if that's one we want to include in our budget assumptions, how that's going to shape the contract overall. So that's my first item.
Okay. Next.
The second item, on number 4, and if I look at items number 4 and 5 in particular, number 5 talks about the ECS Alliance grant, and number 4 hits on some other funding and grants. I know number 4 says that title and idea have held flat, but for a budget assumption, going into the budgeting process, it would be good to know if there's any grant money that's being lost for any reason outside of just those specific grants. We have a number of grants, and one that comes to mind is the, let me make sure I get this right, Hartford Foundation of Public Giving. And that's not the only grant where we rely on programs and rely on personnel under that grant money. And if a grant was to expire, that changes the complexion of the budget conversation that we're going to have in that season. So I don't know if there's an opportunity in number 4 to be a little more expansive, to say that, besides just title and idea, if we are holding flat really on the grants across the board.
Yeah, I can share the answer for that. That is our expectation. Our grant application is into the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. Had funding discussions with them. We don't have an award letter yet, which we aren't expecting till later December, so we'll know that shortly. But I would suspect that grant would be flat or decline slightly. And then our other grants that we rely on are really renewable yearly grants, but it's not something to the magnitude of the ones we're talking about that we would have to cease the program or make significant reductions. They're more of the yearly application that we do for, say, Perkins grant to fund a machine for career and technical ed or something along those lines. That kind of that yearly grant applications we do. But I think we could add some verbiage to number 4 if the board would like us to mention that we're expecting all other grants to remain flat or
And I'm happy to defer to the financial chair and the rest of the board on that, but certainly it is an assumption, right? We're assuming that we're going to have that grant back, as you said, so we're building our budget with that assumption.
Sure.
And the last one's just a question because I lost sight of it myself, but number 8 under transportation. I know when we had that transportation contract, there was a provision in it where we can decrease our transportation expenditure if we're able to provide a location in town for the buses to park. We might be past that point. I think we had to do that after year 2 and before year 3. But it is worth bringing up now because at the end of this 5-year contract, there might be an opportunity going into the next contract that if we can provide a facility for the buses to reside, that's an item that can be reduced in cost. So I don't know if we have an opportunity to talk to the town about that item with a look, not necessarily for this year, because I think, I don't remember if it was last year we had to have that in by, but as an opportunity for cost efficiency in that line item.
Yes, we're past that, you're correct. It had to be for year 2 of the 5-year contract. And so we lost out on that opportunity. However, the good news is that DATCO purchased land and built a facility in town, and they're here in town, and so there's tax revenue coming into the town, not only on the building, but also on the buses. So it does, in many ways, counteract that cost, because if we look at it as a town as a whole, what really the savings to us was going to be, that savings that DATCO would receive from tax revenue, because they'd be on, land that would be, not taxable, and then some additional savings that they wouldn't have to build a facility. But I think that was their preference as well, and, we lost out on that opportunity. So I don't think we'd be able to put that in a new contract, but, there is some good news out of that for the town.
Okay, thanks. Thanks.
Anyone else? I want to let everybody go first, Ron, before I recognize you again. Ms. Fissel?
Thank you. So I was curious about how much of our total budget is reliant on some sort of grant dollars, whether that be federal entitlement grants or state dollars. I believe it was 70%.
70% of our budget?
Yeah.
So that question is a bit loaded just because a grant that the town receives is the ECS funding, which goes directly to the town, that helps offset our budget. So if you're including that amount, then yes, but that's an entitlement grant. All of the grants that we have and send in, get applications for, it would be around, 7-8%.
All right.
And then ECS is 12,450 with the alliance. So I think it's the reverse of that. I think if you added up all the grants, it's probably closer to 30% grants, 70% local tax revenue. We can provide that to you. So we'll have the budget assumptions on the December 18th board meeting. We can give you an exact figure at that time.
I feel as though when we're making assumptions right about the budget, then including maybe that information would be helpful as a guide. I know the grant dollars at that 30% rate can be up to other people to decide whether or not it's going to be allocated and how it's going to be allocated. So I think that would be worth sharing. And I've asked that, for a couple of years now about how that is organized and what the percentages are. So the other thing is, I'm wondering about the same item that Mr. Bach raised around the collective bargaining, and I believe that we're looking at an assumption around like 1%, right? That the budget would be increased by about 1%. And I'm wondering if we could put in something in here to show that maybe like the percentage of our total budget that is accounted for through these collective bargaining agreements.
So everything that, right, everything that you're discussing is what actually gets produced for the budget book.
So maybe
the assumption is
we pull it out then in some way. So I'm curious, maybe we keep that on noted then as something we want to make sure we really emphasize when we discuss the budget moving forward. So you're right, it might not be an assumption that our
and for instance, also all of our non-cert contracts are up for renewal this spring. So we won't even have final numbers for those contracts until hopefully May or June. So again, that would be an assumption that we're still going off of, but it could be an estimate, a range.
Okay, thank you.
Am I adding that to the assumptions, or is that
Not
later?
yet, no.
Okay.
So for the next meeting, then
We would have to vote on it at the next meeting.
yeah, so we brought up at the full board meeting.
It will.
Yes. The other thought that I was having language related to ECS funding remaining flat for alliance districts, and how that's different than districts that are not designated alliance districts. That's seen an increase in their ECS dollars based on whatever of calculation that has been for them, right? As we remain an alliance district, right, we want to make sure we let people know. I believe that the ECS dollars have increased for other districts that are non-alliance districts or non-designated alliance districts, while we really remain dependent in some way on these alliance district dollars. And that is varied, as it says, but what does that mean for us in comparison to other districts? So how do we include language around that sort of question?
The way we would add that language is through discussion at the board meeting, and it would be a board vote.
Okay. Thanks.
Anyone on this side? Mr. Elliott?
Yeah, thank you, President Lockhart. Dr. Cook or Ms. Batchelder, there's been a tremendous amount of conversation, at least I've heard scuttlebutt, about an increase in the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We have probably solidly over 200 employees that probably are under $15 an hour. And I'm sure our bus drivers, I'm confident our bus drivers, our people that work in the cafeteria, and others that provide services directly to the town or to the Board of Ed are probably not getting paid over $15 an hour. That all being said, one is there force majeure in the contracts for the various people that provide services that will force us to eat the higher wage and all the costs related to it? I know that our substitute teachers are, at least one of the people from the substitute teaching firm was complaining about Amazon because they apparently are hiring a lot of people. And those people are, that grouping has had to their wages go up because of demand. So my question is relative to the budget and how we move forward. How would this affect us in Windsor?
Definitely be an impact. The bus drivers are over $15 an hour.
They are.
I believe just about all employees under union contracts are above $15 an hour. But I think, as you know, if that's the market rate, then for minimum wage, then I would see there being some impact eventually. But I don't see that for July 1.
Yeah.
I don't see that that's going to impact us immediately. And as Danielle said, she and Dr. Hill will be very busy. They have 4 of the 6 contracts are open July 1. And it's always a discussion about how that works out. But I don't see there being a tremendous impact on this coming budget.
No, and there wouldn't be a tremendous impact moving forward either, because the majority of I don't know where the 200 employees are coming from, but we don't even have, all of our union contracts are above that, so it's not.
Our peers?
I can give exact, they're on a range.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, absolutely, the starting is above that.
Yes.
Okay. Because I had the impression that some of our people that work in the cafeterias, the people that work
that's the only area that possibly may be right around that mark, but that would be it.
All right. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, seems like we're going to have a lot of heartburn over budget assumptions. So what I'm respectfully asking everyone is to, this is going to be the document that's going to be brought underneath the motion to start discussion. If there's anything you wish to bring as substitute motions at that point, I just respectfully ask that both caucuses, through Mr. Fury and Ms. Fissel, talk to each other, let each other know what's coming down the pipe, i.e. no blind sides. Make sure that we're all on the same page and that we have a very civil discussion on the matter and move forth. So I will relay that message to Mr. Fury. And Ms. Fissel, you've received it live from me. My only comment about budget assumptions, I'm strongly against having any type of language where it talks about collective bargaining. especially with the fact that we have other collective bargainers that are about to go through their process at the end of the year. And the only one that's really going to be highlighted in this budget assumption is the one that we just signed with the WEA. So I really don't want to put a spotlight on them. I believe the process that we just went through with the teachers is fair to them and well-deserved. And in my opinion, this is me speaking as a board member, not the president, they're deserving of it. And I don't want to put an unnecessary spotlight on them and allow them to be able to focus on what we hired them to do, is to educate and take care of our children while they're in our buildings. So I see where you're going with it. However, the unintended effects that may come behind it may be something we may not be able to walk back from. So that's just my personal position, and I would vigorously defend the gang stat being on any type of budget assumption. Any responses to me? Because, I know I like to end last, but I did make a statement, so. Hearing nothing?
Sure.
Mr. Bosch?
Yeah, I'll respond. I know there's uncertainty in 4 contracts that aren't out there, and it's not meant to be a spotlight on any one. It's simply that it is the single biggest line item in our budget. And as we're building a budget, I think, it's responsible for us to know where we're starting, because that's not an item that we discussed at all, right? That's a fixed point. And to know where that fixed point is, well, fixed to a degree, once it's there, to know what the impact of the contract is, I think is very fair to include as a starting point. I see no intent of highlighting any one contract, but I see for us going into it, it's simply an assumption. It's not even highlighted, but just this is where we are. This is, what we're working with, and, we build from there. I understand your point. I hope that wouldn't be the case, that it would be, this unnecessary spotlight. It's simply what it is. So, but just a point, and I love the way this document's written, so I'm happy with the way it is, but if other folks want it, then we'll talk.
Fair enough. All right, moving on. We will go into the update of the internal and external task force committees. I will recognize Dr. Hill, Dr. Cook, and then you can bring him up.
Yes, thank you, President Lockhart. We're going to start with the external committee tonight. We have their presentation up front. I want to start, just in case I don't get a chance at the end, to thank both committees. Lots of hardworking people. Appreciate them coming out tonight to help present. I know they put a lot of time into their presentations. Not a lot of parameters really put upon their presentation, other than just kind of giving them a general time frame. Did receive them recently, and did not give feedback really on the content. It was more about formatting, and so we're excited to share the work of the committee. They've kept us updated through meeting minutes and things like that throughout. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mary Kay Ravinola, and it's great to see Tracy Peterson here tonight, and Steve Carvalho.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for the opportunity to have this committee to look at ways to improve our school system. So first of all, can we just introduce?
Yes.
We could introduce the people that are on the committee. So
My name is Tracy Peterson. As you know, I'm the principal of Aquanic School.
Mary Kay Ravinola, principal at John F. Kennedy Elementary School.
Stephen Carvalho, Director of Pupil and Special Ed Services.
Kate Morgan, parent.
Cynthia Romero, ESL teacher, K through 12, and parent.
Samantha Blake, parent.
Sally Grossman, parent.
So those are a few of the people. You'll see the long list when we get to it.
So our charge as the external task force committee, as you know, is to bring forth recommendations to the Board of Ed based on our discussions regarding school climate here in the Windsor Public Schools.
We're trying.
Steve will work the
Technology.
clicker.
Working people.
Or not.
Or not.
Is it not working?
I don't know. We see the light going on.
Maybe went to sleep.
Technology, it's a wonderful thing, and it works.
I don't know.
It's changing
When
on
it
the
works.
computer, though. That's why.
Yeah, when it works.
Oh, I didn't see Paul Pano sitting there. Oh, my God.
He's trying to hide. You caught him.
He's trying to stop the camera.
I have no problem with Paul.
It wasn't the emperor.
I know. Is it frozen? I just wonder.
Gotta wake up the little person inside the machine.
The wheel.
The wheel's not spinning right at the moment.
Someone grabs a bat.
So it wasn't the emperor.
No, see? No, the hook.
Isn't that the normal way to fix it?
Oh, you gonna embarrass him?
I can see this. I need a
Yes.
15-foot bat.
That would be more appropriate.
Ron Alabama's head.
Because you know he's gonna stay to the end. He's gonna have comments. I think Paul's getting the itch. I think he's gonna run again. Yes, everybody should have copies, yes. Yep.
What? I think we should proceed.
Yeah, we're gonna proceed through, yeah, keep going.
Yeah, certainly.
$15 minimum wage and that. It's like,
So they said,
people don't get it.
You keep going.
All right, you have,
We have them,
oh,
yes ma'am.
perfect, all right.
It's huge problems.
so we talked about our charge, Mary Kay, you want to talk about the committee?
Yes, so our charge is, as you can read, is to advise and develop recommendations to the Board of Education regarding school climate. And our committee members are listed. We had Russell Sill, who was our original facilitator. Then Tracy Peterson and myself became co-facilitators. Steve Cavallo. Leanne Tyson's also on it, who works for the school system. Kate Morgan, you saw. Hasha Gonzalez is another parent. Taisha Serrano, who's a parent and a school employee. She's an FRC person at Sage Park and Clover. Cynthia Romero, you met. Samantha Blake is here. Timothy started with us as well, the first one. And Ayanna Taylor was a member until she became a Board of Ed member. Shauna Tustin has been an active involvement parent. Sarah Maffalini, who's the Youth Service Bureau. Sally Grossman you met, who just started with us as well, and Maureen Bellato was our faithful note taker.
And hopefully you can see that that committee represents a diverse group of parents and staff members in the district across all of the levels.
All right, and a very dedicated staff as well, because we've met 8 times since this has started, and last night we actually met to make sure that we were prepared for today.
But we didn't check the PowerPoint.
We didn't check the batteries.
So if you go to your 5th slide, surrounding, it says the Board of Ed External Task Force, major focus area. The thing we talked about when we initially started was the social emotional learning. And what did that mean? Because that meant different things for different people. So one of the things that the task force did was work with CASEL, which is that the visual that you see here that shows how many communities on the outside, followed by schools, followed by classrooms. So the CASEL organization, I know you're smiling. Yeah, is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And so it really provides a framework so that we're all coming from the same page surrounding when we're looking at social emotional learning. And it talks about education hearts, inspiring minds. It's really about a national movement that's out there. So that's what we used, and that visual just guided kind of our work and our conversations. And we had some really great conversations surrounding that. We looked at each of those areas. And really when you talk about SEL, social emotional learning, it's that process of children and adults. We want to make sure that we talk about everyone together. And they talk about in CASEL acquire and effectively apply knowledge, attitude, and skills. And I think we always have to reflect that that's an ongoing process. It's never stagnant. It's never about a packaged program. It's just about how are we always learning about ourselves and each other, especially in this global society. And so that visual was really helpful. And when you go to slide 6, this is what CASEL really breaks down. It talks about self-awareness. And these were some of the things that we talked about at some different levels about, one, self-awareness of identifying the ability to accurately identify yourself. What are some social awareness, some responsible decision-making, identifying problems, our ability and students' ability to self-manage, impulse control, stress management, self-discipline, and even, importantly is relationship skills, our relationship with one another, how do we communicate, our social engagement. So some of the conversations we had, especially early on, was, this isn't just about for the kids, but it's about the adults at the same exact time. And then we even talked about some of our early conversations were about how do we do those things now just in the form and the environments that we're in. So in a forum such as this, how are we when we're outside of school, when we're inside of school? So if anything, I think we all discussed it's a really nice way to self-monitor what we're doing and how are we modeling all of us in this room as adults and outside of this room as adults for all of our kids. And I think kudos to the team because I think we had some really great conversations about where do we go for next steps. So I think this really just provides just a context and a framework about what our other committee members will be talking about going forward. Thank you.
So Cynthia, Kate, and Samantha are going to come up now and introduce some recommendations we had.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for volunteering.
So, your next slide, as you look at your next slide, you see a great picture of what right away we wanted to approach the town and get the town involved in our task and in our task force and the purpose for our task force. So on our focus on social development, learning in order to improve our district school climate, we feel that it will require our town's community sectors to take an active role within our schools. As you know, we currently have over 3,000 students enrolled. They're all unique. They all have their talents. They all come from different backgrounds, cultures, and they're very special. And we want them to somehow be connected, exposed to, and just plugged in with our town and feel a sense of belonging in our town. Because our town, I feel, it thrives with the community that we are. So our committee is recommending the inclusion of our town's community sectors in our district and school events. So if we can somehow pull them in, it will be really helpful to our students. Our community sectors include education, youth, parents, faith community, law enforcement, civic groups, businesses, youth servicing organizations, medical professionals, media, and town government. This will greatly benefit our students' social emotional development and build a more connected community. One of our conversations as well was that our families are somehow not as connected as when my children were younger. I've lived in the town for 24 years, so I've seen a shift within our community. So we're trying to make them connect more through the sectors. One more.
Back one.
Before.
It works.
So we know that, and the second visual that you see there as sustainability and cultural competence, we feel that it will require constant communication between our schools and a sector's point person from the different sectors, just having a point person to ensure and guarantee involvement. Some examples of different events that are happening at the schools. We have a Kid Governor program where now that we think back about it, as we reflected and having these meetings, we feel like we could have had the town council come in and be a part of that. For the speeches, we could have had the media, we could have had the high school come in and encourage our students, develop their talents and their leadership skills. And we also had a Red Ribbon Week, and that's the drug-free, we decorated doors, and it was an exciting time for the students, but we could have had law enforcement come through and just cheer on our students for their efforts on making that awareness throughout the school. So we want to, by including the sectors, we feel that we can advertise our schools, we can show the town what, the great things that are happening at the schools, and the students will develop their social emotional, develop their confidence, they'll develop their talents, they'll develop their gifts, and connected to real world people out there. Instead of being stuck in the four walls, it's actually a world out there that they can connect to. So the ultimate goal is to reach all families. So therefore, reassessment, as you see there, reassessment, action steps, and different action steps will need to be created and implemented so that we can effectively serve our diverse community. We're blessed with the community that we have, and I think we need to definitely do a better job connecting to all of our families in our town.
To go along with the community aspect, we also came up with other ways to reach members of the community and get more families involved. Some of them would be, I know some of the places around town, the restaurants, libraries, town buildings, they all have the TVs in there with like the rolling bulletin boards and all that. We could put something in there to say, who are we? Who are we in Windsor? What do we expect of people? Maybe have, make people aware of what we provide, what Windsor Public Schools provides to the community. One of our ideas possibly was monthly interview meetings or introductions to different programs, either by Dr. Cook or one of the principals from one of the schools, or somebody to say, hey, this is what we offer, come check us out. And more kids see stuff like that, they're gonna say, hey, Mom and Dad, I wanna go to this thing over that my school is doing because my friends are gonna be there, and then parents follow. So I think it's an indirect way to also get more people involved. We also said, came up with the idea of forming an alliance with other places and individuals throughout the town, pediatricians, social workers, daycares, all sports programs and athletic programs, not just town-sponsored ones, but run by everywhere. And to say this is what is expected from the students here at Windsor school system. We expect on all levels respect for one another and general niceties, basically. Create more brochures and just make more people aware of what we offer, all the positive things that we do offer, because we are blessed in the sense that Windsor does offer a lot. But we can there's always room to improve.
So the next slide is talking about a little bit more about the social emotional learning being a priority with long-term support for implementation. I'll just read through those and then focus on the one that I'm going to talk most about. We already have a Second Steps program, so we're using that as an example. But something along those lines for social emotional learning for our students in Windsor. We currently have that program, but again, it could be discussed more about what would be best for the town of Windsor. Provide professional development opportunities in district and out of district for staff to develop knowledge of practices that create and support a healthy social emotional culture and climate in the school as well as classroom. You guys have that that you're looking at as well. Include social emotional learning components in the development of the Windsor graduate. This is the one that I wanted to focus on most, to create a more user-friendly website and app for Windsor Public Schools. And this part really, one of the things about social emotional learning is establishing and maintaining positive relationships. And as we're talking about connecting the community to the schools, I know as a parent, that is something that will be incredibly helpful for me. And I've spoken to several parents, and I actually moving ahead here, but I think schools can encourage the continuity at home that we're doing in the classroom by sharing emotional strategies, by helping parents understand the cell language. Not every parent understands social emotional language, and really passing on activities. And those are already currently being done, so it's not that it's not. The mediums that are currently being used are letters sent home, regular emails, we get those. We also get postings on the school website, so those things are there. But the question is, how do we maximize the use of this school app that we already have? I'm not sure if you guys are aware of it, but we have a school app. I was not aware of that. I just found out about that. And I actually went around and polled parents to ask them if they knew about that. And I spoke to about 10 parents. 7 did not know we had an app, and 3 did. And among those parents were a couple teachers. So it's important to understand that we have this amazing thing already, so I'm not even asking for money. I'm not. This is great. We already have this, and it's a way to bring learning to the families, because we want the families to come in, but not every family can come in. And when we bring the learning to the families, I think what it does is it does create a less stressful environment. I think it helps with the positive relationship, parent-school. I do think that sometimes parents can't get to the school if they may not have transportation, they have work obligations, people have disabilities, younger children, language barriers, all those different things that an app that we currently have can be used. So I looked this up and it said almost 2/3 of adults use smartphones. That's huge. And it is a great opportunity for us to bring the community and the school together, to help the parents to feel connected to what's going on. It helps. The app is also a way to streamline communication. I have so many apps. I have got Remind, I've got Dojo, I've got Team Connect. For the sports, I am getting notifications, I'm getting stressed out, and I'm stressing my children out because I'm getting all these notifications, and it's not very simple to get information. If I have to call, if my child's going to be, if he's sick or he's going to be absent, I've got to call the school. We already have an app that this can be embedded into. It's there. The app can be made more user-friendly, but we already have it. I think that I appreciate the teachers doing so much to get us the Remind app and all those different things, but they can already have that, and it could be district and school-based. So I think it'd be good to go back and do some research on that one. The training is free. It's already, we have it. It's part of the program to retrain whoever is responsible for that in the district. Even the marketing, where we talked about the televisions and all of those different things, we can have those placed in the doctor's office so parents will hear about this, know about it, and now we'll use it. And I do think that will help us to even see that people do want to participate. I really believe that. They're just not always able to get to the schools. And this would be a great way, I think, for parents to see the district really work at including them. And with those apps as well, there are different things you can embed in there. There are videos you can put in there. There's streaming things you can do in there, but you have all those. You already have it. You're paying for it. You may need to add just a little bit more to it that can get embedded in. So.
Questions about the app?
Thank you. The parents coming up here and participate. I love it. Good evening.
So since I've only been on the task force for a week, they gave me the super easy slide. Very little wiggle room to mess up. Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All right, so promote a district slogan that is repeated and celebrated throughout a student's educational life in Windsor and all the schools. So this is really, would be a K through 12, a slogan that the children have, transferable from each school. So rather than each school having their own slogan or their own logo, this would be something that would get, children and parents excited about it. And we came up with a couple just of examples. So keep the win in Windsor and we are Windsor. So it would be something that we can put on, T-shirts and stuff like that, but it was something that can be repeated throughout, the 12 years in Windsor.
So continuing forward with not only at the district level, but the school level, another recommendation is that ensuring that the social emotional learning continues to be a long-term priority for the district, 3 to 5 years, really looking at different ways to support implementation at the school level. So for example, as Samantha mentioned, we already have Second Step, but things like Second Step that are implemented with fidelity for all of our students.
Yep, and then the next one, we already mentioned that at the district level, but also at the school level, ensuring that we're not, it's not a canned program like Steve mentioned earlier. Social emotional learning is huge, and there's a lot to read about, a lot to learn about, a lot of strategies to incorporate into your day, so to keep making sure that we're on top of what are the best practices for our students.
And then lastly, ensure that we're continuing to measure school climate annually as we do through our school climate survey to see how both staff, students, and our parents are engaging with the school and how they are feeling about our schools and our connections with them.
And one thing we talked kind of a little more in depth about the school climate was that not only do we need to take it, but we need to make sure that we are pushing information out afterwards as to how it's being used in the school system, because that will give more push for people to take the survey. Currently, we have low, like 20%, which is enough to consider it a valid assessment, but to all of us at the table, we didn't feel that was enough. We want to hear from everybody. So how do we ensure that, what you're going to do and give us your time and effort into something is going to be beneficial to you and your child?
Okay, so also at the school level, we want to develop or expand student leadership groups. So there's stuff at the high school level where seniors will help out freshmen as they, come into the school, and they have things in elementary school such as the buddy bench, which I thought was adorable when I learned about it. So it's basically a bench out at the playground, and if someone's sitting on it, that's for the students to know that that person, needs a buddy and they need to be invited to play. So it's really allowing students to take a more active role in creating a positive school environment. And then host new family student orientations throughout the year to bring in new families and students together and to learn about the culture of the school community as well as the Windsor community. So that's just kind of tying in more of the Windsor school system with the Windsor community as a whole.
And that is it for us. So do you have any questions for us?
Well, first I want to say thank you very much for the work that you've produced thus far. And I'm going to open up to the board for questions. I'll start with, I saw Ms. Taylor first. I'll start with you, ma'am.
Thank you, President Lockhart. I am personally very excited. I was on this committee, and it's just like I'm teary-eyed because it was so hard to crunch everything that we kind of wanted to do, and you did it wonderfully. So I just took some notes. Excited, thrilled. Social emotional learning is where I think that's just the crux of it, and the community is just the apex. It's like that's it, and that's what's going to really keep the win in Windsor. Buddy bench, yes, thank you very much. I push for that. It is necessary to thank you to take the time, because it's sometimes a thankless job to step up to the plate and meet and discuss some difficult issues when you're bringing your own baggage to the table. But it was great to see that so many diverse people can come together, leave it at the door, and get the work done. So I'm super over the moon, super proud of all of you. This is priceless information, and I personally feel that we need to take it not lightly and get to work on this. Thank you.
I'll shift back this way. Mr. Domer?
Thank you. Again, want to thank you for all the hard work that you guys have done in regards to this. A lot of the board members here were hoping this is the path you were going to go down, and we're glad that you did. So it looks like that you've basically identified what needs to be done to get from, say, point A to point B. What it just sounds like is that we need to create a robust and more user-friendly town marketing and communications plan to bring the entire community into the fold, so to speak. So I commend you guys for that. But I only have one question only. And this question is for Kate. Oh, yeah.
Of course it is.
Now, Kate and I have spoken before about the whole climate and the school system and everything. And I just wanted to get your feedback, excuse me, and your feelings about being part of this process and just find out, what your thoughts were. Because I know where it was at the beginning.
Oh, yes.
So I want to see
everyone knew where my thoughts were at the beginning. Being part of this process has been very wonderful, honestly. Not only did I get to work with some great people, and get to meet everybody, about it. But I learned that the community really needs to step up as well. I knew that going in, but it became more relevant. We are certainly blessed with what we have already in Windsor, but there's so many school districts that don't. So that being said, I do recognize that, but there's always room for improvement. And I think as a community, we all still need to step up. It takes a village, it really does. And we need to stop this whole, I'm doing it on my own attitude and start, it takes a village, let's help everybody out.
Okay.
So that's my thoughts. I think this is a very beneficial task force.
What I'd like to do is take that little clip and put that in the library.
Please. Oh, God.
And everywhere around. No, I appreciate that. That's all I had. Thank you.
Mr. Bosch?
Yeah, I'm not sure where to start because we covered so much, but we'll start with thanks. I know a lot of work was put in, and I am glad that there was a strong focus on the social emotional learning. I know some of us on the board have talked about that being a focus. I know some administrators and teachers have. So to see that as a focus in the heart of this work is very encouraging. I don't know too deeply what each of these programs are. I know we've done some of the implementation of second steps. I know we had Paul Cavallari say he was the first one that did this in the district, and we've had some debate on whether that was true or not.
But,
it wasn't. No. There was no debate. It was not true.
I'm very glad to see Ms. Peterson back.
Very spirited.
This time.
All rested and ready to go.
So, let me start with this as one of my questions, and I think Sally, right at the end, kind of preempted this question because I'm listening to it, and it's a lot of great stuff, community involvement, this, that, and the other thing. But if I'm thinking about the students, and they're hearing from adults, whether it's police officers, this or that, it's good for them to hear from adults, but it's even better for them to hear from their peers. An adult is, great for a little while, but we're old people to them, right? We're not really relevant to their world. And I was looking back at the notes from the board meeting in November, and we actually had a speaker come in who was a student herself. We had 10 people speak in front of the board that night before we started, and I was reviewing that. We had a student come from Loomis Chaffee, who was a former student at Oliver Ellsworth. And this was last November. I would encourage anyone that hasn't seen that's on one of these committees to go back to the November board meeting and watch the intro and hear what the folks said that spoke in front of us. In fact, the first speaker of that night was one Kate Morgan, so I was glad to get that perspective. But the final of the 10 speakers really brought forth the idea of that pair mentoring, having the older students work with younger students. Maybe she was in high school, and I don't have written down everything she said, but she really talked about, can we get the high school students going into younger grades? Because students are going to listen to their peers or the folks that are a little older, or more than they'll listen to us. We'd like to think they'll listen to us, but you're parents. A lot of you are parents. It's not always the case. But at the very end, we touched on that. I think the buddy bench was one touch of students helping students. We talked about that and some of that supports. But I'd like to see, or even get your take a little more deeply, maybe not right now, but as we go forward, how can we use one of our own resources, the students, to help each other and model good behaviors? And I know we do that all the time at JFK now, is students helping students. But I think that's a big component that was lost until the end. I'm adults, community, which is all good things, but student helping students is somewhere we can really tap into.
I think there are initiatives in different ways in those areas already, and I think they can be expanded. So for example, I know at Quantic School we have something called Kindergarten Partners, where second grade classrooms partner with kindergarten classrooms, and they come together to do various projects. We actually have fifth graders coming from Clover Street that are going to teach a master violin class to some of our younger strings students. So I think those things are more powerful. If you think about last year when we had the seniors come down from the high school who were graduating in their caps and gowns and walk the hallways. I have to say, in all the years that of being working here in the district, that was one of the most powerful things for all of us, to see our former students come and engage with our students, because what it does inadvertently, right, even without the conversation, it tells a younger student, that's going to be me one day. And then we actually had teachers who taught those students interact and engage. So I think we all agree looking for those opportunities to expand student-to-student interactions to help develop and build those skills is extremely valuable.
And the only other piece, and I don't know how to phrase this, thank you. And actually, I should say thank you, because we do a lot of good things. I think we don't pat ourselves on the back for as a district all the time. And when we do things, we have the younger students going to the high school students perform with younger students, these concerts where we have the middle school and the elementary school. Those are amazing things, and you saying that reminded me of some of those amazing, everything reminds me of some of the amazing things we do. Unfortunately, at the board, we don't always have the time to talk about all the amazing things. We have to go into some things that are tougher issues. So when I think about this issue of climate, there's two pieces, and I think we're putting a strong focus, which is good, on the proactive piece. How do we develop a better climate? How do we work with the community? But then there's the other piece, that things happen. We hear the stories, and again, going back to the November meeting, where we hear of somebody getting punched, or situations that we're trying to prevent. But then it's when we're in those situations, I think these programs will cover not just the proactive, but the reactive. How do we make sure that when we're in those situations, and they will happen, no matter how good we are, it's a school, they'll happen. How do we get out of them? How do we deal with that student? And how do we allow the teachers to teach in their classroom, which is ultimately everything else we do. Ultimately, we're going to have, during most of the school day, a teacher in their classroom, and we've got to make sure that they're empowered too, so when with all the other tools, when that altercation does happen, one punch is thrown, all these other things are temporarily forgotten, and you're the heat of the moment, and I don't know the exact question, but just then taking it to, from all the proactive things, hopefully have less that, but then we have that. How do we make sure, that's kind of stopped?
I think one of the things that you probably have seen reoccurring in a lot of documents is the idea of restorative practices, right? You've done something wrong, and how do we bring that student and back into the fold? How do you repair that piece? I know that on our November 6th PD day, there were a group of teachers who actually participated, self-selected to participate in something called restorative circles. So that actually creates a circle where you do just that, right? What do you do after the thing has happened, and how do you make it right and move forward? So I think at every level, staff and are engaging and learning more about how we incorporate that more thoughtfully and intentionally into the work that we are doing. So I think we're on the same page.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm done with that, but I think it's really important. I think these conversations are really important. Just the fact that we're having them, I think really shows a lot about the direction we're trying to take and where we're going. I think it sends a strong message. And I'll just say, I think "We Are Windsor" is kind of a phrase I've heard someone say over there, and that's what I hear all around. You can try to go for "Keep the Win in Windsor," but good luck beating the "We Are Windsor."
We are indeed.
Ms. Khan?
Okay, I have a few things. I'm going to try not to repeat too much because I think everybody over here is really happy with, things we've been hearing. So some of the things I noticed, I really like the idea of town culture. So when you were talking about, promoting it in other places, I'm thinking me as a child walking through town, I'm at school, I hear about this, this is how we behave, and then I go to the library, and then I hear it there, and then I'm at my doctor, I'm like, whoa, it's here, so, and I think that consistently seeing those and even adults modeling those in those places, because now you've introduced it to the librarian, so the librarian's not just going to hang up our poster, they're going to know about it, and they're maybe going to even implement some of those in their own practices. So I love that. And when you were talking about that, I was thinking, well, maybe a slogan or something would be nice, and I'm writing it down, and then we bring it up. So that was perfect. I love that we also mentioned the consistencies at home. So I think that's one of the biggest pieces, because I'm at school and I'm being taught to behave a certain way towards others. And then I come home and I'm being taught something completely different. And not because my parent doesn't want what's best for me, but because my parent may not know how to teach it, right? Because none of us know exactly how to do the right thing as parents. I don't. So I think somebody mentioned it, but less stress for parents. I think it was over here, but when you're bringing the learning into the home. So, and I think a lot of parents, even though they're not coming out and saying, teach me, but I think if there's access, whether it's a device or whether it's online or whatever it is, or it's just being implemented in other places, I think parents would love to learn, because parenting is hard, and when your child acts out, no parent likes to see it, and not everybody knows how to deal with it. So if we're providing that learning, I think that's great. But overall, I think this is, just a very good show of how when you bring all these stakeholders together, you bring parents together, teachers together, principals together, all people who care, what you can do. And I think you took school climate and you Windsorized it, which is another thing I really like. I'm not to overtone, but that's what it is, because you're bringing in, community, parents, the school, and you're bringing in students. And I think that's unique to us. So I think there's a lot of work ahead, but I think we have a great team. So I'm really thankful to all of you. Thank you.
I saw Ron first. Sorry, Mr. Elvelt.
Thank you, President Lockhart. First of all, I want to thank you for your efforts on behalf of this. It's quite often thankless to do volunteer work. Mr. Dobler, thank you so much for asking the question that I was going to ask.
Thank you. Thank you both, really.
So you saved me a question.
Is that a good or
however,
bad thing?
I did hear someone very passionately discuss the app. My question, I don't know if it's to you or to Dr. Cook, is there was some, am I hearing correctly, that there could be greater integration with, let's say, the school administration in respect to being able to report certain things? I'm getting a positive yes. Is that something that can be looked at, Dr. Cook?
Yes.
It is being looked at. I completely agree with what was shared. That we are, we had some good adoption, I think, when it first came out, but I think we have to look at the current app and changing it to a different carrier or upgrading it, but it's kind of at the max. I mean, I think it's helpful if parents want to access school lunch menu when they're in the supermarket and deciding whether they need to bring or buy tomorrow, or the sports schedules, things like that. But I think we need to go beyond that, and I think that's what is being shared. And there has been some internal discussions, which I think also came out of the committee's work, but also some of our work as well. So absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Sissel?
Thank you. So I'm very excited right now. I am a huge fan of social emotional learning. And I just thank you so much for all of your hard work. I was very critical of the task force, the process, the formation. I was critical, not necessarily because I had any malicious intent, but critical because I very much care about this work. And I was hopeful, and I'm just thrilled with what you've produced. I am excited because I feel like as you concluded, the questions that came to mind was how are we going to support this effort? So how are we going to look at policy? How are we going to look at curriculum? Like how are we going to look at budget, right? How are we going to look at assessments, like you mentioned, school climate, and then also even like looking back at the Search Institute assessment that was carried out on like student drug use, and they had a bunch of other items in there around well-being and sense of self and even sense of belonging. So we have everything that we need. It sounds like we're coordinating now, which is huge because there is a national movement around this. There is a state task force, there's like SEL for CT, there's a momentum building. And what I love about Windsor is that, and what I'm learning, thank you, in my humility as a sixth-year board member, is that there's a lot of effort being put into this right here in Windsor. And so thank you, because you're just, I'm very surprised, and I just wanted to acknowledge that because I'm a very critical person. You can ask my husband. Okay, so the other. Sorry, Alvin.
He just fell off the couch.
Okay, so I bring this with me now to almost every board meeting. It's like the accountability report. And I keep raising also this issue around like how are we like addressing like this issue, like this elephant in the room, that there's like a number of our students who are just really struggling. And the way that I've been imagining it is, and this is like shows like disciplinary data and like, you know, the kind of stuff that, you know, weighs heavy on our minds, is I've been imagining these kids like walking into school with like this emotional backpack, right? And it's filled with whatever happened during the morning, whatever happened the day before, whatever sort of restlessness in the night. Maybe it's filled with some hunger, maybe some shame, some fear, some uncertainty, right? And they're carrying that into school. And SEL is an approach to like unpacking that backpack, rearranging it, making sense of it, and lightening the load, right? Lifting that kind of emotional burden. The thing though that I also heard you guys talking about is like how does stress like affect the adults too? Because SEL is all about stress. And Brian, you had mentioned like, Mr. Bosch, like this idea of like what do we do in the heat of the moment, because those kiddos are coming to school and maybe they're reacting, we're seeing it in the data, right? They're carrying stuff with them, they don't know how to like kind of be in the moment, right? And so in that heat of the moment, SEL with the stress reduction strategies actually literally stimulates like the vagus nerve, which puts back online the communication between our emotional brain and our prefrontal cortex. Like the science is also behind SEL. So thank you for giving me those 3 moments, those 3 minutes to be able to get all of that out there. You're doing great work. And one program that I would encourage you to just take a look at is called Conscious Discipline. It is evidence-based SEL, and it may be an approach to kind of meeting in the middle, because like discipline is a heavy word. We don't want to be disciplining children using punitive approaches, right? Especially if they're having some trauma stuff and what, you know, the stuff, right? And so conscious discipline kind of, it combines the SEL strategies, but also helps with those boundary setting, and it may work really well with the alignment with PBIS. So that's it. Thanks.
All right. Any other discussion? All right, I'm not going to parrot what's been set up here. I agree with mostly everything that's been set up here. I truly appreciate the work and effort that your team has put in. I'm not going to put a time and date stamp on your work, but I will say that I would like whatever work that you are producing for the rest of this academic year to please have it in by May, so that we can discuss it at the June meeting going into summer. So I don't want to pressure you. However, I want to make sure that at least by the last board meeting of the academic year, we can have a time and date stamp of where we are at that point. And then once we get into the summer, we kind of fall off a little bit, enjoy family, and rightfully so. So just want to make sure I put that out there. All right, but I truly appreciate you. And for the board, any recommendations that's in this, I'm going to bring this packet to the executive committee for the January meeting, and then I'm looking to put this on, and January is going to be a packed agenda, I get it, but this is very important. I would like to see us discuss the recommendations coming from the committee, and if we approve any of these things, if they need to be referred to Dr. Cook or a committee of the board, then I'll do so as president at that time if it's approved. All right? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good job.
Poor Alvin.
I know. And then you went on your FPL tirade.
He's on Facebook right now. Next up will be the internal school climate, correct, Dr. Cook?
Yes, and Dr. Hill just switched presentations, and I believe he'll be coming forward at this point.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little trash to my colleagues who just went first. Uh-oh. So I'm expecting this is going to be real quick. No, they did a great job. So, but it's nice when two groups start on opposite ends and they kind of meet in the middle. So I was sitting there like, okay, why are they talking about our stuff? It's supposed to be external. That word EX means outside, but it's okay. We're going to do our best.
Looking at you, Jay.
I know who brought up the internal stuff. It's okay. How are we doing this evening? So, as long as Ms. Fissel is smiling, we know we're good. We're going to get started. This is like tight, too. Danielle, she's trying to hide. Okay. So good evening, Dr. Hill, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources.
Hi, I'm Phaedra Duras, Assistant Principal at Windsor High School.
Danielle Batchelder, Director of Business Services.
And so we are from the internal School Climate Task Force. Before we get started, we have obviously, like the first group, we have a slide that shows all the members, and of course, all the members aren't here, but those members who are here tonight, I'd like to have them stand up over here. So we have some folks who braved the cold to come out and join us. Just introduce yourself, your name, what school you're at, and your role. Chris Williams, Sarah Clover.
Megan O'Brien, Stephanie Lockhart, Assistant Principal at Windsor High School. Sandra Bailey, High School. Michelle Smith, School Social Worker at Quantic Elementary School.
Okay. Welcome.
So they'll be put on the spot shortly. Get this started. So as you can see the name, we wanted to, from last year, our original edict from the board, we're a task force. And task force by nature should be temporary, but clearly we know it's not temporary. And I would say that decision, even before we heard it from the board, that's what our committee wanted. Because once we got into the work last spring, we realized that this is not something you can just get done in a few meetings and give some recommendations to the board and be finished. Not if we want to seriously change the climate as it is. And the things that we heard from the external committee are spot on. It was kind of sad to hear about the app 5 years later, but we know we got work to do, right? That's what the reality is. And I see the work of the internal committee as being just that, for a range of things, that we're going to actually make sure that these things are being done. Because everyone likes to hear all the nice things, right? We got this box, we got that box, we got this program, we got that program, but are they being implemented with fidelity, as Principal Peterson said? And what are the results that are coming from them? Just because you have a lot of things and you're implementing that thing, is that thing actually working? So just, this is the overview portion, because we did present in June. So for those folks in the audience, and we want folks just to know what we've done. So we convened in March, as I said, from a directive from the board president and from the superintendent, and we began meeting. The committee, I like to also say, the committee has changed, so we have some members who are no longer on the committee, and we have new members. Again, this is important to us, so we wanted to make sure that we kept this committee going. So I reached out to folks across the district to get a mix of folks and to keep this committee moving. So that was the 1.0 in the spring. Our goal was to advise and develop recommendations to the Board of Education regarding the school climate, which we did. Here's our meeting list. So you see on the left-hand side from the spring. And obviously we're just getting started this year. So don't worry, those months will be filled in. We just have got going because we actually took our time to get this set up and started off on the right foot. So we did a survey, and as you'll see as we proceed, how the committee is going to move forward with the way we're doing our work. All the members, and of course it's for folks in the audience. I don't know if everyone took a handout. And I have to say that Assistant Principal Duros is missing, but she is here. She is missing from that list. I think it's an impressive list because it's a total cross mix of the employees here in the district. And I just wrote them all at once. So what we said to the committee last spring, again, this is all part of the overview. We said to the committee last spring, here's what our charge is, so we came together. And as I shared in June at the board meeting, it was definitely a interesting gathering as we got stuff going, because everyone came in with all their stuff, and with my parents. I appreciate your honesty.
Oh gosh.
She said, no, I came ready to just blow stuff up. So, you know, we had people who came like just, and I get it. You know, when I've been doing this for a pretty long time, and people come with, you know, their own emotions, their own experiences, and you have to validate those things. And so we got all that out. Because now it's time to actually start addressing. You can't fix things staying in the emotions. Correct. You have to actually get the emotions out and then start moving forward with, okay, so now what is it that we're actually working on? And we have to find a common ground. All right, so we defined the desired culture we want, because people say we want the climate. I'm sure if I went around this table right now, you guys would all have some different things to say. I wouldn't ask you in order, and I wouldn't let you do it out loud, because then you just copy each other. So people have a different idea when they say, what school climate? And we heard that, and we wanted to address that immediately. So, and we want to address and identify the gap. So between what people were saying, what they wanted, and what they perceived, or what was actually reality in the schools, we knew that's what we had to work on closing. I believe that's the work of both committees, maybe two separate committees, but we're working for the same, you know, purpose, to close the gap. And the gap is really between the community, what they hear, perceive, and see, internally, what we hear, perceive, and see, and how we think we're projecting ourselves, because what you project is not always what people are seeing. So we want, and so then we want to propose the recommendations for closing that gap, which is what we did, but those recommendations were just the beginning. So what we did, the important piece to bring to you from the spring, is that with a lot of hashing out, we came up with a common definition, and we say draft because, you know, I kept saying during the meeting, just like in our Constitution, we should be able to make some amendments, but this is something that we came to a common agreement in the spring as to what our definition of climate is. So when we start talking about climate, this is how our committee, this is what we're working from, this definition.
I wanted to just add to that, we actually discussed this for almost 2 full meetings, so 2 hours each meeting, to actually get everyone on the same page of what we truly believe climate is, because we can't have a task force if we don't have the mission behind it. And so that mission statement is what's driving the work forward.
So the recommendations, so first, these were the district level recommendations. I'm going to read them all to you. But basically, continue to develop a district-wide equity plan that addresses climate and culture. And I'll stop right there, as we had a parent say earlier, because this is the one I want to focus on. Because people will think like, well, we're talking about climate, why equity? Because it's all intertwined. Okay, something that we came to, because we actually had folks surveying people in their buildings last spring, so they could actually hear, not just themselves, but hear from their colleagues. And one of the things that's there is there's some issues around equity in terms of folks don't know how to work with each other. That's really what it comes down to. We heard Ms. Khan talking about just recently. Her comments were on the parents, right? Like the difference between what's happening in school, what's happening at home. Not to say it's wrong. It's just this is the culture and the norms of this place. This is the culture and norms of this place. And so when you bring people together, individuals or groups who have differences in norms or culture, there's bound to be some conflicts or some misperceptions, and some of you are aware of implicit bias, so biases come up, and they definitely play a part in all of these. Classroom, schools, you see, there was a lot there. And we didn't want to dismiss anyone's, and please jump in. We didn't want to dismiss anyone's information, so when they went and gathered this information from their respective buildings, of course we synthesized it because the lists were just long, but there were a lot of repetitive things. So it was synthesized that this is definitely the core, and again, what was presented in June in terms of what folks were talking about, what they wanted to recommend at the classroom or school level. So again, connecting back to the external committee, a lot of the things were, I don't want to say 5,000 feet because they weren't that high. It was probably 100 feet. So now we're just on the ground. But I am excited that we, in separate committees, over these months have seen the same things, and then we start working towards the same things.
Yeah, and I just wanted to jump in. We talked quite a bit about not getting rid of those things that are working or that we think are working, but how do we actually go ahead and assess that they are working, and keeping those and then finding other things to add to it to further our practice.
And also what came out when we discussed this was the unknown from school to school or district to school from some staff members, from all of us. Just having that alignment from each sister school, for example, to make that transition a little less of a transition from 3 to 5 to Sage or Paquonic to Clover, in trying to streamline how they're working with kids and what they're doing for the social emotional aspect of it.
And this is going to kill me, but what Ms. Boucher just said made me think of something that I have to give credit to Ms. Peterson, Tracy Peterson, actually brought up a few years ago, and she talked, I'm giving you credit, you better record this one, Tracy. So she talked about, in one of our leadership meetings, probably about 3 years ago, about developing a strategy so that we can produce a Windsor student. So and the things that Ms. Boucher just mentioned are very much aligned to what Ms. Peterson was saying, that a kid shouldn't come from Paquonic and go to Clover and then experience different rules, different culture. Other than the age, we understand that, but it should be pretty much a stair-step process for them as they move through our district. And again, we may not say it that way, but that's actually what we're coming to, as you've heard the external committee already talk. When you talk about having some norms, basically that's what we were saying, some norms. Like this is what we expect of a Windsor student. And we're also saying the external, this is what we expect of Windsor families. So, good job, Trace. And then, of course, the community. And we didn't put a lot there because that should have been for the external group. Like we stayed true to the mission. But but of course it's important that we strengthen our community engagement and practices. That's why I think as I was listening to the presentation, it really bothered me with that app. And I'm like, man, this app has been here 5 years. What are we not doing? We're not telling people things. We're not saying stuff. And then she really stuck me in the heart when she said 2 of the parents were teachers. I was like, oh, that's bad when your organizational members don't know what's going on in your own organization. So we know that's real work. So now, 2.0, right? That was the overview. And I know a lot of folks who probably didn't hear the recommendation in June. But 2.0, this is now, as we kicked off this year, and again, as I said, this is important work, and we want to continue this because we want to get this right. We know we have a lot of things in place in Windsor. We have a lot of resources. So we just want to make sure that things are being implemented correctly, and we'll start seeing the results that we say we want. So our timeline, this is your update that you're getting. Of course, we have to schedule the meetings for the remainder of the year. And what we did was we divide ourselves, after doing a survey, we divide ourselves up into 3 work groups. So now this is where I put some people on the spot here in our group. So when I get to their work group, I'm going to have them come up and just kind of share, because we've only had 2 meetings, so I'm not going to, you're probably sweating already. But I want them to share some of the conversation that, started in that last meeting as we divided up, because that was the first meeting that we divided up into our separate groups, into the 3 groups. But as you can see, the 3 work groups, Ms. Fizzle, you should be smiling again, right? It's the first thing that came up, SEL. So I was like sitting there like, why are they taking our presentation? Because they kept talking about SEL. I was like, that's our presentation. But again, it's really, I'm making humor, but it's good that we're talking about the same thing. Right. So that's 1 work group. We also talked about the second step and the high school advisory period lessons. So again, these are work groups because these are things that we're going to work on, and I'll show you the questions that we're going to be asking in each group. Group 2, obviously district PBIS, restorative practices and framework. We keep hearing, I'll just focus on restorative practices. We keep hearing a lot about that, but we don't have any experts yet. That's something that folks are looking at across the district. They're working on it. People are going to receive training. I know that there's been probably more folks at Clover have done more training in that area. But I always look at it as whatever strategies you can find. Like it's never one thing, right? You give a person a hammer, all problems are nails. So it's nice that we're looking at different ways and strategies to work with our populations. In the last group, MTSS, multi-tier system of support, behavior supports. Folks wanted to look at the FBA's functional behavior analysis and the behavioral intervention plans, the BIPs. Look at our policies and practices. I heard you say that, Ms. Fissel, looking at policies and practices, because ultimately that's something that we may have to do. We can't just do changes on the ground. Those changes may kind of bubble up to us looking at the district level and the board level. What policies do we have in place that are hindering the progress that the internal and the external groups are trying to make? What policies can we put in place that will help push them forward? And behavior technician roles, that was specific because that was a recommendation that came up, and I brought it up in June. And so we fulfilled on the recommendation by way of hiring the behavior technicians. So we now have 4 of them. But again, you don't just get things and say, now it's all fixed. We have to now determine, working with the principals, that what's the role of the behavior tech going to be, not just the job description, because we know the reality is people are utilized differently in their buildings and they operate differently. So if we want to say that this is that process in Windsor, then we're going to have to ensure that folks are being utilized the same way and they're doing the same work. Doesn't change who they are as people, it doesn't change their personality. We know that's your own nuance, but we have to make sure they're doing the same things. So here are the questions that are driving us. So you can look at them. I see us going into the buildings, talking to the administrators, talking to other staff members, and something else that came up during the responses to the external group that I think is important, and I brought up at our second meeting. We have not brought in student voice yet. We just haven't. And, you know, I've been an educator for a long time, and I've never been an educator who thought that all the adults, I think Mr. Bosch said that, we're old. Once you hit like 25, they think you're like ancient. So, right, we're not relevant. We're not. And, you know, we may not like that. I don't care if you buy the cool jeans or whatever. You're not them. So we need to get their voice, especially if folks are saying, well, because that's what we heard in our committee, right, internal, all the stuff the kids were doing. And I'm like, it goes two ways. There are adults in the buildings too. So let's find out how the students are seeing the adults, because maybe we're not doing something, or maybe we are doing something that's causing them to react differently from the way we espouse. We're saying, you know, we're concerned about your social and emotional state, your learning, but we're doing things that are antithetical to that. So so in a way, as I was sitting there, I was like, man, we're like becoming the sort of like the police departments, right, internal affairs. I don't want to scare anybody in the buildings, but that's what we have to do. We have to find out the stuff that we're doing, if it's real, if it's valid, if it's working, does it need to be tweaked, does it need to be removed? But we don't have student voice yet. So that's something that we're definitely going to have to pull in before we even get to May. And I'm glad you I was going to say, we don't know what our deadline is, but now I do, because you just said it. So group one. Michelle, come on, please. You guys are sick of hearing me.
See you later.
So they're just going to share, Michelle and Principal DeRose in this group, so they can just share just a little bit about what they started to talk about, because again, we just initiated these groups in our last meeting.
So I'll start talking about Second Step, because that's the program that I'm most familiar with. We have been implementing Second Step for a couple of years now, starting with our pre-kindergarten. There's a program for early learners that we are using with students before they enter kindergarten. And the nice thing about that program is it does have a unit on transitioning them into kindergarten. The other nice thing about Second Step is that it has expanded now into our sister schools, which are Clover and JFK, so that children are exposed to this from pre-K all the way through 5th grade. And I believe that Sage Park also has the program. So it provides a consistency, a structure and support, and common language, so the children are familiar with the language and they're familiar with the behavioral expectations. One of the things that we are looking at is just fidelity of implementation, making sure that all of the teachers are using all of the materials correctly and that they're using them as intended. And so that's our focus going forward with Second Step, is looking at implementation and really honing in on the home component, because I know we had talked about, you know, sharing this information with families. There's a whole piece of the program that is called Home Links, which actually tells the parent what the child has learned and gives the parents some suggestions on how they could support that learning at home, just in their everyday environment. So we're going to be looking at fidelity of implementation as we move forward.
And then at the high school, we have our weekly advisory sessions. So every Wednesday, students meet with their advisory classroom teachers and their classes for about a half an hour. And what we are doing currently is kind of like running an audit of what those lessons consist of weekly. At the high school level, it's not a consistent paid-for program like Second Step is. These are lessons that are designed by a person in the building. Some of them have to do with social and emotional type things, but some of them are also very practical. Like our students have to pick their classes for next semester. A lot of that work is done in advisory. So at the moment, Dr. McIntyre and I have been working on creating this list of what the lessons are and then categorizing them based on what they are, what their purpose is, and whether it's fulfilling this need we have for that social emotional learning piece.
All right.
So harkening back to my internal affairs kind of analogy. So this is a great example that Mr. Roche has brought up about the advisory groups, because lots of schools talk about it, oh, we have advisories, right? So it's like a checklist, like they check that off. And, most folks in the public just go, oh, they have advisories. But what are you actually advising kids on? And a lot of times it's, for just complete transparency, it's just another study hall. Like you sit there and, hey, you're okay, you're fine, I'm good. And so we started talking about that, and I'm glad they've already implemented, starting to look at them and say, hey, wait a minute, we can definitely shore this up. Doesn't mean you're doing something wrong or doing it bad, but just remember, you can always look at a process and say, how can we do this better? Or when we say we need something, right, the things that we're talking about, like our climate issues that came up, we don't need to add more to the day. We don't need to come up with another program. We have something already where we can definitely infuse it with what we need to make the necessary changes. So that's a perfect example. Group 2. So we have Mrs. Principal Lockhart and Mr. Williams. Thanks, sir.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening. Put you right out in front of the classroom. I think it works well.
For sure. Just like Group 2, we are in the Group 1, we are in the process of looking at the fidelity of implementation. There are multiple avenues being used to kind of teach conduct and behavior across the schools throughout the district, whereas Group 1 focused a lot on the social-emotional and the partnership between school and home. We're looking at a lot of the practices that we're using in our schools to help shape the student behavior. Throughout the elementary schools and middle schools, they're using portions of PBIS. Some schools are using it fully, some schools are implementing different pieces of it, and at the high school we're beginning to roll out restorative practices along with some of the pieces of PBIS that we currently use. And so just to find out where everyone is so that we can streamline what we're doing across the district, we are in the process of creating a survey that we're going to send out to key members of each school. We don't want to bombard teachers. They get 1 million surveys every single day, so we don't want to just throw that out to everybody, but we're looking at selecting key members of each school to see who we can administer the survey to. And we're only asking 2 questions. What evidence of positive behavior supports exists in the building? And then how do you monitor the effectiveness of these strategies? Just so we can start to piece together what is actually happening so that as a group we can meet and say, okay, this is what's being rolled out all around the district. We need to make a decision on whether we're going to be a PBIS district or a restorative district, or whether we're going to allow some schools to have autonomy and choose what they would like to use for positive behavior supports throughout their building. That's kind of where we are. Exactly.
And with the restorative practice, we felt not just the teachers doing it or the behavioral techs doing it, but we feel like everybody should do it, because if just the teachers are doing it, it's only working just for the teachers. We need everybody to take it so they can understand it as a whole and not just have one group take it and nobody else take it.
Everyone on the same page, speaking the same language throughout all the schools and throughout the district, because if we are Windsor, we should all have the same practices. Put the wind back in Windsor.
Thank you very much.
And the last one, you see the group gets smaller. I'm starting to get a message like nobody wants to be with me, but I think I got some social emotional problems now. I feel a bit rejected here, right? Like, thank you.
Need a hug?
And we did surveyed and we picked our groups, and I should have said I want to give some credit to Dr. Cormier, who's our expert that we have working with us. He just couldn't make it here tonight, but he has definitely been integral in all this work. And so we had a survey out to the committee members, and we decided the areas in which we wanted to work. And for me, this was just an important area because I want to know what it is that we're doing and how we're implementing things. Being a teacher, building level, vice principal, I've seen the gamut. And again, I'm used to going places and hearing people say lots of things. Oh, we do this, we have this. And I always call it the alphabet soup. They say, we got MTSS, PBIS, da, da, da. And it's like, okay, so your kids are still doing all these crazy things, right? Or your staff is still writing up 100 kids a day. So we need to figure out what is it that we're really doing and what needs to be tweaked. And as I said a little earlier, with the behavior tech positions, we have them now. Folks want it, right? They asked for it. Like, give us behavior techs. So now you got Barabbas. But what does that mean? So are you utilizing those people in the best possible way? Is there any particular training that we can provide to them so they can actually do their jobs more effectively? Are they even doing the job the way a behavior tech, quote unquote, should be doing the job? We don't know. So that's why we're going to have to go in and look. We're going to have to talk to the administrators. I foresee that there could be some disagreement because, I mean, you own your building. Now, as a principal, you want your building to be your building and your people. But if we're saying that we're going to produce a Windsor student, then some things are going to have to be uniform, very much so. That would be it. Questions?
Questions from the board? I saw Ms. Khan first.
Okay. I don't have questions. I have comments. I really like how you talked about the Windsor culture. I think that's kind of mirrors what we're hearing. I love that we're including the input, so the surveys from all stakeholders. I think that will be helpful. And I think how you mentioned, seeing what we have that works well and then trying to implement it in other places. So something that came to my mind when you mentioned that, when we learned about how well we did with our summer school, and then we noticed that, one of the key pieces that was a part of our summer school was how individual the parent engagement was. It was not just parents came to a meeting where the teacher spoke and everybody just listened. It was a one-on-one piece. So that kind of brought back to me the home visits that we have, because I think that's a big piece. And so if we're doing home visits, a lot of the climate, whatever we're discussing in school, that's a good chance to go more deep into conversation. I like the Second Step program. I know Sage Park has it, and then I've mentioned it at some of our meetings. They usually put it in their newsletter, like the family piece. So this is what we did in school, and then this is what you can do at home that goes along with it, which I think is wonderful. It's another way to provide, information to parents, and then it's kind of keeping the consistency. But overall, I like that it's not just this is the right way. It's you're looking at what we already have, what else can we add, and then we're looking at several approaches to see what we can use best, because not just one approach would magically fix all the problems. I think we can use things from all approaches, so thank you.
All right. Ms. Bissell?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to say that I just got really excited about SEL, but I acknowledge the community involvement aspect of the previous presentation. I think that is really critical as well. I just want to follow on the SEL thing. So, for your presentation, I did have a question that came to mind. Did you complete the SEL district assessment through CASEL to kind of determine where we are at as a district?
No, we didn't do an assessment.
Could that be done? It's like, I actually did it myself.
You call it the
Not for Windsor, but I just want to.
Say it again, please, so I can type it in.
Yeah, so it's the SEL district level assessment. You just go online to CASEL's website and you can just fill out, it took me maybe like 15, 20 minutes, it's multiple choice. And it gives you an overall assessment of where you're at on the 5 indicators that CASEL uses for SEL. And that might be helpful, so I thought it was helpful. The other thing is, I think we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because I keep hearing language around expectations, and I love the fact that we're having a conversation around culture and norms and the consistency across context, right? And then how do we use the language, right? Because language is like a vehicle of expression, and we have to come up with shared agreements around the language that we're using. And we're stuck potentially because we have implemented this really heavy behavioral approach that really puts this external focus, right? So how is the student behaving? And if we can understand, if we can change the behavior, then maybe everything else will change. So if we just can reinforce the expectations just a little bit more, then maybe they'll get it, right? So then so social emotional learning is about the language to describe the internal experience of a child. But then it's not just the child, it's all of us collectively as people. And so I really, really hope that we think about how do we create kind of like SEL moments throughout the day. So for example, in some other school districts, so if you look at Eastside High School in Newark, New Jersey, they've been implementing like an SEL program for about 3 years. And they, instead of doing their moment of silence at the beginning of the day, they still have the moment of silence, but the entire school engages in like a mindful moment, and they use a focused breathing technique to everybody just does it together, and it's the norm now, and students facilitate this. So they also have the peer buy-in. So that instead, it's like in that mindful moment, the students describe, it's like basically like a reset button for the day. And you know who also benefits? The teachers and the adults in the building, because we carry all that stuff into the building too, right? I mean, I'm just there as a parent, but you could probably ask sometimes at State Park, I carry a lot in with me as I'm, just rushing in the morning with the 3 kids. So anyways, the thought that I did have, though, the final thought that I had about your presentation is around the student voice. And I really, really look forward to maybe hearing the next time in May. I would love to hear a student speak about this. Oh my gosh, that would be such a great addition to your presentation. And let's hear them describe what SEL means for them and what restorative practices means for them, because that's really the greatest testament as to whether or not this is reaching the students, is if they can describe it. So thanks for all your work.
I would just interject one part there, because I'm with you on student voice.
I love it.
But so I don't want to just box them in by saying like, what do they feel about the SEL or whatever because they may come up with something else too. That's what I want to hear from them. So what is it that they feel about what they came up with? Because what if they come up with, the moment of silence and the breathing? I'm just using your example. And they should talk about that, because that's why I want that voice, because I want the students to say, this is what we say we need, and then report back. And I'm sure they're going to talk about those things too, but I just want us to be, because I know we're on the mic, and for people to hear, like, I don't want them to come in June or May and think, students are just going to talk about all the things that's over 25 has talked about. They may have something totally different.
Great, okay, I'm okay with that, thanks.
Yeah.
Mr. Elvo?
Thank you, President Lockhart. Well, thank you for your efforts. I know it's a lot of work when you have a group of people and you have to try to kind of corral them and get things moving in the right direction. Kind of smiled when relative to the common look and feel comment, because I remember, and I think it was almost 4 years ago, that you brought that point up in the conversation. So my question really is, and that's also similar to what the external group said, in that there should be some commonality. Are we making any progress in that respect?
Well, that's why we're here, these groups.
So I think, so, and to piggyback off what Michaela was saying, so I think one thing that came out, I know of the internal task force, is what we as adults assumed we were doing and assumed everyone else was doing weren't. So that was kind of the eye-opener of when we start discussing it, and each school is saying something a little different. So it made everyone stop and say, okay, we need to hone in on getting Windsor, like, for example, we're doing, what's a Windsor graduate? I mean, what is Tracy doing at Pequannock to then Michelle doing at Clover, and making that transition. In order to go forward, we have to get that completed. We have to all be on the same page, all of our adults, all of our teachers, all of our paras, and get them the professional development they need so everyone is working together and doing the same for our students in order to do that. But I think that was the eye-opener of, we gotta stop assuming and really hone in on exactly what are we doing and make that more uniform.
And provide the same training. So, Mr. Elevell, to your point, in order for us to get there, we're aspiring. I wouldn't say we're there yet. But as Mr. Williams said, we have to also even look at our own professional development. Like we seem to always think this group needs this, and this group only needs this. And I'm not speaking to specific job tasks, but when we're talking about cultural shifts in organizations, everyone has to get that same training, hear the same message, practice the same efforts. So that's how we're going to move when all folks are doing that.
Well, at least the first step is to start conversation and create some implementation tools around it in order to be able to move forward. And I wish you luck in the effort. I'm sure you'll succeed. Thank you.
Welcome. You good?
Yeah.
Anyone else? Mr. Bosch?
So I'm eventually going to get to number 2 on district PBIS and restorative practice. But thank you. I don't think the 2 days spent on the definition were wasted. I think that's a good framework. I've probably read this like 20 times as we went through it. I do really enjoy it. I think you guys landed in a good place. And as odd as it may seem, that was 2 days well spent to really start things off. I do agree with you, Dr. Hill. I was thinking the same thing when we saw the external task force. I was like, I had to reread the title because it was like internal. I thought there might be something else coming out there, but that aside, they came down heavy on social emotional learning. So everything's forgiven from wherever anyone came from because getting to that place is great. One of the things when it comes to climate is really, and I think we touched on this, we talked about fidelity of implementation, is really consistency, right? If you're anybody in life, especially a young student, you're going to respond to something that's consistent, versus, okay, I got caught this time, or okay, I got punished this time, but not that time. And coming into the district PBIS, and I know I probably have a lot of ignorance on how the practice of things are, but I heard about practices that are different now, which maybe they should be, but I wonder, on that consistency, where one of the low-level interventions is, maybe Dr. Hill, you're standing up and, talking in my class, and the intervention is I compliment, Ms. Batchelder for sitting down and behaving. So I don't know if that directly addresses you or not, but another situation you may encounter is you get upset and you, not that you have a water bottle in class, but you throw it across the wall. So the intervention is, okay, I leave you there, I take the rest of the class out of the classroom. So I don't, the question is just I'm looking at the exact practices there, and if I'm only addressing you indirectly, and it may work, but there's some indirect addresses I don't know myself, because I came in through an environment where you did something wrong, you got yelled at. And I was a great student, but they were not afraid to, yell at me if I did something wrong, and we kind of stopped dead in our tracks. So I am interested on that work stream. I think the restorative practices, and looking at that is really good, because ultimately, there's 2 things at stake here. There's really getting that student to the place we want that student to be, but there's also making sure that all of the other students in the class can progress. And we do have to balance both needs. But the first need, to me, is making sure that one student's misbehaving, making sure the rest of the class can progress. And I know we've had presentations on this before, but out of everything, it's focusing on, are we doing consistent implementation, and is it working, the things we're doing, particularly with some of those kind of indirect approaches to addressing behavior versus what some of us are used to, more direct approaches. And I'm not looking for an answer right now, but that's one of the things I'm looking for as we go through.
Great. All set? Anyone else?
I wanted to thank you all because, again, it's volunteer and your day doesn't end. You stay behind and you do this for a few hours. And even though it took you 2 days to do the mission statement, I think this is something that we can sort of kind of take back to our silos and really meditate, right, Michaela, on it. Maybe take a moment on it. A few things that popped up to me is I know, you know, the behavioral techs were hired and all those things. I really wanted to piggyback on what you said, Dr. Hill, about making sure that they know exactly what's expected of them. I think sometimes when we throw around the word behavior, it has negative connotations, and you know, just to throw a woo-hoo to JFK, with their reset room and just the positive reinforcement and their moments of clarity in the morning and everybody kind of coming together on one accord is just necessary. And we're talking about from school to school, but what about from individual to individual in the school? Your way may not be my way of handling a certain situation, but so to maybe take it more, instead of macro, but more micro, and really boil down to how we're dealing with situations and children in a holistic way, to just make sure that they're getting what they need from the adults in the building, across the board. Not the same way, because every situation is different, but the way we handle things are the same way and a little more equitable. So I love that. The work is just beginning, as you mentioned. This is, I mean, I know we have I'm not going to call it a hard stop in May, but a little pause in May. But I think that the Head Start, it's amazing. You have a who's who on the list here, because Windsor professionals in education are dynamic, but from what I've seen already, I'm pretty excited about everything that you're doing. Kudos.
Any other discussion? Ms. Hissel?
Okay, thank you. I only get to do this like twice a month, so. Okay, so there's like this elephant kind of in the room that kind of hangs heavy when, at least I think about SEL and when I think about like the emotions of students. So, like there's this question that I learned like probably about 3 years ago. It's like, you know, how do most children see adults dealing with stress? And it doesn't have to be within their own household. It could just be through technology or in the changing society. And how are you going to ensure that our students are hearing this message and they don't go home and maybe walk into maybe a situation where they're then parenting their parents and then wind up getting into some trouble? So has that been considered? If not?
Well, I don't think we've discussed it as a group, but I'll just go out on a limb from just the years of experience, and that's what I spoke to initially when I referenced Ms. Khan's comments about the school culture and the home culture.
Yes.
And I'll be a bad guy and say it. That's the danger that we have to consider when we as school systems try to direct homes. And I know folks don't want to hear that, but that's how some parents will take it, period. It's just the way it works. I've worked in, obviously, Windsor. I've worked in cities. So I was in Hartford, but I worked in Newport News, Virginia, way bigger than anything we have here in the Northeast. And when kids would just leave my classroom and go and say, you know, Mr. Hill said, that's not how we should be doing things. I can't tell you on this microphone the stuff the kids came back with from their parents to me, you know, and it wasn't apples. So it was just, that's something you have to pay attention to, and I think that's where the connection and the synchronization between the internal and the external committee will work, because the external is dealing with the parents and the community and the other folks. So if we're saying the same things, we're working on different ends, but saying the same things. So when kids are going home, you know, little Johnny's not saying, you know, Daddy, you're bad because you're saying this. There have been messages already sent home saying, hey, these are some things that we're working on. So Daddy should be expecting to hear, you know, little Johnny repeat things or correct, because that's what kids do, right? Someone gives them a message and it's like, you didn't act like a good sport. You know, it's like, get out of my man cave, right? So, but they're going to tell you that kind of stuff, and I would say get out of my man cave. But those are the things that we have to pay attention to. And that's the micro stuff. So again, we like saying all the things we have in place, all the resources, but you have to pay attention continuously. And I thought about this, Ms. Fissel, when last spring or late winter you said, hey, we're going to have these task force. And I'm like, I hope folks know what they're getting into, because I've been a part of this work in other communities. And once you start reaching out to people's homes, everybody not come in and have cookies and coffee.
Right.
So you have to pay attention to that, and you have to be sensitive to that too. That's all.
So one thing is like that, maybe that's where like the culture and the norms conversation kind of can get really sticky, right? And kind of uncomfortable, because how is the school going to come in and tell me how to run my household? That's just, oh, thank you. And so shifting like what you focus on grows, right? So shifting from like what are the behavioral expectations and norms to what are the shared human values that we all collectively honor within ourselves and we'd like to see within our neighbors, right? So it is around like shared human values versus, expectations and norms. So, so I would encourage, like, as you go through, it sounds like a social marketing campaign as I hear these two task forces kind of combine, where it's like you're trying to send out this message around, like, the community, right? This Windsor community, what is great about it, like, what are our values, like, and then, like, you would like to have the community really own that message and bring that into our homes and bring that into all of our spaces. So I just encourage you to think about, instead of like norms, to like values. Because everybody wants our kiddos to succeed. Everybody wants to feel love. Everybody wants to feel belonging. Everybody wants to feel all that stuff, right? We just forget sometimes when we're in stress. So just kind of throwing that out there. Because you might be actually looked to eventually from the community to say, hey, I am struggling at home because I am pulling my hair out and I am working 2 jobs and I can't show up to that PTO meeting, but I want to be there. And I can't show up to partner meetings, but I want to be there and I'm stressed out. And they might come to you and with that and want to share that and have you help them.
They will come.
They will
That's what I
come.
said. I've done it. So like, if people have, like, I like the idea of the home visits that we started, but it's not a bad Pandora's box. It's what's necessary.
Lovely.
So, but I don't want people who are just starting out thinking like, oh, we went and yep, we had cookies. That's some houses. There are going to be houses that throw the cookies at you, and you got to find a way, to say, hey. I'll just close with one of the things that I did when I first came to Windsor in 2002 as a vice principal. So I was new to the community, new to Connecticut, sort of new to Connecticut, but definitely new to the community. And so parents like, who are you? And, it was sort of like this unwritten expectation that the new black administrator was going to be able to work with all the black kids. But they didn't know me, and I didn't know them. So and then I'm having to call you to tell you your kid's in trouble for doing this and that. So I fell back on my experiences in Newport News, Virginia. And so when I would sit down with parents, I was like, this is a beautiful community. You moved here from where? And they will quickly tell you, Hartford, da-da-da-da. And I said, why did you move here? And they're like, because, da-da-da-da. I'm like, oh. So your values conversation, I just used what they gave me. So you moved here to see your child blossom. And I'm here to help you do that. But these particular things that are happening are not blossoming types of behaviors, right? And, I would like to think they worked. And I still have relationships with many of those parents, 16 years later. So, because you have to meet people where they are first. That's why I want to stress to us that we don't keep throwing out to people that we have all the answers. Because that's how schools come at parents. And that's the wrong attitude. Because you're going to find some resistance. Come at parents saying, hey, look, I'm here to work with you to help your child be as successful as possible. What do we need to do? That's, all right?
Any other discussion? All right, thank you very much. Thank you for all the work. Last thing on the agenda is announcements. I've wrote the names down this time so I don't forget anyone. Starting with Mr. Ellerveld.
Nothing today.
Thank you very much. Mr. Halleck? All right, thank you.
No announcements.
Mrs. Taylor?
No announcements.
All right. Mr. Bosch?
Just one this Saturday, we have an event in Windsor that we're lucky to have, the Torchlight Parade in the Carol Sing. I wasn't ready to start talking. I think it's 6 o'clock. That's why you probably know 6 o'clock. So it's a good event in the green. I know not all towns have all the opportunities we do in Windsor. So if anyone's around and wants to come out, it's been a great event in the past. I think there's going to be some snacks and drinks there. You get to see the fire. Beverages and snacks.
No bonfire?
It's going to be great. I heard, and I don't know this for sure, there's going to be about 20 pieces of fire apparatus that are decorated and coming through. So it starts with the carol sing. You have the fire apparatus. Hopefully it's not too cold on Saturday, but it's winter. It'll be a great way to spend your weekend if you're in town.
Thank you, Mr. Boss. Mrs. Khan?
I'm just going to quickly say I was at the high school yesterday. They had a watch party for Kimberly Joy. If you don't know about Kimberly Joy, she's a former student of Windsor. She graduated 09, and she's on The Voice. So she made it to the top 10. Today we're supposed to find out if she made it to the top 8. So just, keep watching her kind of progress. And then the main thing is just keep voting for her. But I really want to thank Windsor High School for putting it on. I think it was great. Her music teacher from high school was there, Miss Tracy White, and then even her Sage Park teacher, Miss Rock, was there. So it was really nice, the community to come together. Her family was there. So whoever was putting that on, whoever was behind it, thank you. And then lastly, Sage Park has a vendor fair, which is at...
Sorry.
Okay.
I forgot. Sage Park's vendor fair, multicultural vendor fair, is at Sage December 8th, which is Saturday, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Come on out. Free childcare.
All right. All set, Ms. Khan?
Yes.
All right, Mrs. Fissel?
There is a documentary screening of Chasing the Dragon, which is the life of an opioid addict, happening tomorrow evening at Windsor, in the Windsor High School Auditorium. It's co-sponsored by the Windsor Police Department, Youth Service Bureau, and Windsor Public Schools. And it is tomorrow night at 6 p.m. I would encourage anybody viewing, anybody in the audience to really attend this, because it's intended for community members and also middle school and high school students. So there is some strong language and some graphic images. However, the opioid epidemic is hitting very close to home, and you can't really not be aware at this point, if you have access to sort of technology, of what it's doing to our communities. So tomorrow night at 6 p.m. at Windsor High School, and there will be a panel discussion with the FBI moderating. So my husband will be there with my son, so I'm excited that they'll be attending. So that's it. Thanks.
All right. I want to publicly thank the town council for approving our school security grant that was submitted today. That was a big push by Dr. Cook and the administration, so thank you very much. And I also want to publicly thank the town council for handling business in regards to the WEA contract as well. So that's all I have. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Such a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Ellaville. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Ellaville, second by Ms. Taylor to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Abstention. Motion carries 7-0-0. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.